Welcome in, Hawks fans. Your boy Bryce Lewis back at it again for another Believe in Hawks episode. If you've been watching the pod for a while, you may be familiar with these two guests I have on the screen right now. The Rattler brothers are back on Believe in Hawks. They cover the New Orleans Pelicans for New Orleans basketball, as they were here when the Dejounte and Dyson trade happened last season, gave their analysis on that. And now a season has passed by, and we're going to look back at that trade, how it impacted both franchises, plus some other topics surrounding our teams that may also intertwine as well. So I appreciate both of y'all coming on. How are y'all doing today?
I'm all good, man. I'm hanging in there. You know, times are times for the city of New Orleans and their sports teams, both of them, professional sports teams at that. So, but I'm good, man. I'm hanging in there. I appreciate you having us back on, man. And you know, hopefully that we can knock this out and shoot this down like Dyson did. How you doing, Raph?
I'm good, man. I'm blessed. I can't complain. The Pelicans are not in the playoffs, so we have a lot of research and a lot of things to uncover and go back on. We got a lot of extra time on our hands on this side, but everything's blessed on this side, Bryce.
Hey, man, listen. Obviously, y'all know season just ended for us last week. Tough times, but, you know, a lot of big offseason coming up for us and everything like that. So we're excited to kind of see where that ends up going for us and kind of seeing how things kind of play out. And, you know, talking before we got on, obviously, I feel like our franchises kind of have similar trajectories, similar paths a little bit with some of the things that we've gone through. We both done recently. We both do front office stuff and looking for next season try to get out. Obviously, you guys have the potential of getting, as some people say, the next great white hope in Cooper Flag. So we'll see how that goes. But but that's not what we're talking about first. That's not what we're going to talk about first. First thing we're going to talk about is the trade that impacted both franchises that took place last year when y'all got Dejounte Murray and we got Dyson Daniels. And first, I just want to start with you guys and just ask you this. Obviously, Dejounte had a season-ending injury. Unideal, right? But how do you feel like, from y'all's perspective, in the sample size y'all were able to see with Dejounte, how he was able to come in and play with who y'all had? Obviously, I know y'all had a lot of injuries, but who y'all had on the floor, how he was in a New Orleans Pelicans uniform.
Well, go ahead first, Raph.
I'll take that. So, Bryce, that's a trick question because for the sample size that you got to see Dejounte Murray in, either Zion wasn't available game one. Out of nowhere, hours before the game, he's sick, he's unavailable. So from game one, you missed Dejounte and Zion chemistry. Well, after game one, Dejounte broke his hand and was out for an extended period of time. And so it's hard to, my brother and I have talked about this countless time on our podcast. It's hard to judge the trade in its entirety because there were moments where you're like, okay, this is the Dejounte that you brought in to help facilitate to some of these guys who can't create their own shot. That's when you saw Yves Missi, the outstanding rookie from the Pelicans class, really step up. You could saw their two-man chemistry really develop there for a guy who's not able to create his own shot, get easy lobs at the rim that the Pelicans have been missing, quite frankly, since Anthony Davis, right? And so there was moments throughout there. His shooting percentage really never got where it was intended to be or what you traded for him to be. I know he had a lot of personal things going on with his mother having issues and then obviously the injuries, both of them on his own regard. But it's hard to kind of judge because there were really high highs, but there was 0 minutes of Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, and Dejounte Murray last season. So what you traded for and what you brought him in for, you never really got to see. So I would say incomplete, if I could put one word on it.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of what Raph said, Dejounte got to New Orleans, it immediately became part of New Orleans culture by having the most unfortunate events that could possibly ever happen to you all at once. That's just, my brother and I have a conversation, running joke going that New Orleans doesn't really know how to lose gracefully. It's always something like left field, about the Minnesota Miracle and the Nola no call and Steph hitting the corner three, Boogie tearing his ACL at the free throw line going for a rebound. There's just a lot, tearing his Achilles. There's just a lot of things that happens in New Orleans sports history that just immediately you oh, yep, that's something that happens with New Orleans. And it hit Dejounte as soon as he got to New Orleans and suited up for the Pelicans. I mean, he started off. He only played the one game in October. He played 2 games in November. Then he played 15 in January and 13 in December. By the time he was playing in December, that first game that he played, he had a near triple double. He had 14 and 10 and 8 rebounds, and everybody was like, "Yes, here it is." Right? The Pelicans started off 2-0, and then he got injured, and then when he came back, I think he came back a lot quicker than he probably should have. Like he came back. And kind of was trying to fit that, fill that hand in and get his comfortability back. But by the time January came around, he was like getting to, you were seeing stuff from him. He scored a season high in January. He started to get his feeling himself. He started to get that kind of swagger back. I know you know what I'm talking about when he's on the court. And then again, as per usual, a game against the Celtics where the Pelicans had pretty much about as good of a team as they've had all season with Dejounte there and Trey there and Zion there. He tears that Achilles. And so, again, it's very difficult to see because you saw some of the things that you wanted to see as far as passing the ball, as far as the defending, pairing up with Herb Jones on the wing defenders. It just sucks that, they never got an opportunity to have that entire team together.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like I said, y'all saw it in small spurts. Obviously, watching Dejounte in Atlanta for 2 years, I know what he's capable of, especially running the point. A guy who I think when he was with us, obviously developed his shot, became a better shooter, but also can actively do other things. Obviously, he can assist. Not obviously, maybe people don't know him as a playmaker, but can do different things. Can get on the boards. A guy who, like I said, we know about his mid-range shot. We know that's one of his best parts of his game. So I think it definitely sucked. Obviously, in the 2 matchups we played against you guys, he was not available for either one. So we weren't able to get the Dejounte. Well, was he not available for either? Yeah, I think he wasn't available for either. And unless he played in one, unless I'm forgetting it. But
no, I don't think he played in any of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think he played in either one. So they, we weren't able to get, Trey, Dejounte, whatever. So I think obviously sucks for you guys. I'm assuming, unless something changes, that he will still be part of the plan for you guys this coming season. And then hopefully if everybody can stay healthy, we can kind of see what that looks like.
Yeah. I would venture to say so. Obviously, he's a well-respected player and a very talented player. But again, I remember my brother had this conversation. And it's interesting because I liken this situation to some couple of different other situations. Like I always say that Cat never saw Ant coming, right? Like he never saw Anthony Edwards coming in and taking the shine. He always thought like, this is my team. I got enough time. They're going to build around me. And then boom, Ant lands into Minnesota's lap. And then the same thing I've said about CJ McCollum, right? CJ McCollum came in to be the third banana to Brandon Ingram and Zion. Never saw Trey Murphy's skyrocketing development happening. This is very similar to those situations with the Pelicans because going into this season, there were high expectations about this lineup. We talked about, a starting lineup with Dejounte and Trey and Herb and Brandon Ingram and Zion and who's going to come off the bench. Is it CJ? Is it Trey? And then, you fall into the season where everybody's injured and you end up with possibly the number 1 pick in the draft, right? And so also during this season, one thing you found out is that Zion at point guard, basically with the ball in his hands, as like the point guard, that has been the best version of Zion we've seen in a long, long time, maybe in his entire career, what we saw this year, the little games that he did play. And so it is going to be very interesting, especially if the Pelicans, somehow end up with Cooper Flagg or Dylan Harper, either one of those guys who are ball handlers, or need the ball in their hands, or guys who are going to be featured in the offense. And then you talk about Zion at point guard, and then Dejounte is going to be out. Going into probably entering into the season, there's just a lot of questions there about, who's going to be the starter? Because now Trey Murphy has ascended. And so you're probably betting on him being in the starting lineup, and Herb Jones is first team all defense. So you expect him to be there. You get your best version of him on guarding the best player. And then you have obviously a center. So it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how much, depending on this draft pick, how much Dejounte fits into what this new basically new leadership of the front office thinks. about this guy because it's going to be their draft pick. And so it's just going to be very interesting.
There's a couple things that kind of play into his favor. One, I don't know who's rushing to trade for a player coming off an Achilles injury, making $30 million. So the Pelicans, whether but like my brother likes to say, by hook or by crook, probably are going to have Dejounte Murray on the roster for the entirety of at least next season. But to his point, very quickly, even though the Pelicans had, the fourth worst record in the NBA, very quickly, the numbers for Dejounte are starting to struggle, right? You just named 4 players that you could make, 5 players that you could make, especially if it's Cooper Flag, make an honest case for, hey, this guy needs to be in the starting lineup above a Dejounte Murray coming off an Achilles injury. Now, in terms of the front office and their player types, Troy Weaver was hired today to go alongside of Joe Dumars. They're defense first guys. And so DeJounte's whole mantra and a part of the appeal of trading for him was pairing him with Herb Jones and pairing him with the defensive backcourt that's going to give you problems. The other thing is when he's coming on the back after this injury, and everyone says this injury, if you recover completely at all, is 15 to 18 months, more than 12 months. You got to start looking at, well, now he's 30. And now he's 31, and now the cap's at a certain spot. So at that point in time, is he a luxury, or is he someone you look at like the Celtics and say, well, they've got 8 guys, and 2 of the guys that come off the bench make $30 million. Is he a high-level, basically starter player who's in the 6-man role, right? And so there's just a lot of questions, and there's a lot of roster movement that's going to have to happen with this team this summer.
Yeah, and I think obviously everything about it is just return on investment. When you made the deal with us, you were hoping, oh, this is another scorer, another guy who can give another option, take some of the offensive pressure off of CJ, off of Zion, off different guys. And obviously, like I said, with the injuries, that completely, changed the trajectory of that. And I think, that's another reason why I think Pelicans could stick with DJ too. It's just, hey, let's give him another year. He gets back. Let's see how he fits in, and then we'll make decisions. Because sometimes when you have these new regimes come in, they want to see first, okay, let's see what this looks like before we make any decisions. And they may want to do that with Dejounte when he can get healthy. And speaking of return on investment, I want to switch this over now to the Hawks side of things with Dyson. Obviously, when I brought you guys on here last year, you guys were high on Dyson. Y'all said Dyson has a lot of traits that y'all really liked. And I don't know if anybody projected Dyson to be what he was this past year. I think we knew he was a good defender, but did we? And we knew that he had potential to maybe be a first-team all-defensive guy. Did we expect it in year one of him being a full-time starter? Maybe not. He's in the defensive player of the year candidacy. He's also in most improved player candidacy. He has been an ascending player that has taken the league by storm. He led the league in steals by a lot, by deflections. He's the first guard, and I think almost over 20, 30 years who led the league in stocks. I mean, he has done a lot of great things, and he's really changed a lot of things for Atlanta because people see his defensive energy, and it's very contagious. It makes other players say, like, if he's fighting that hard, I need to fight that hard off screens. I need to try to create plays defensively. And so, and obviously offensively, we knew that was the biggest question. But I think for some people, they think offensively he may have progressed a little bit faster than some people thought. Because that was the biggest question. It's like, okay, what is he offensively? We knew he had like a floater, but like, what is it? And I think as the season got more continued, he got more comfortable. From what you guys have seen, from what y'all obviously were able to see in New Orleans, to what y'all saw in Atlanta, what has been the biggest things that have stood out to you about Dyson?
I can start this one off. 2 things: availability and opportunity. Like we talked about a year ago on this pod, Dyson's one of my favorite players to watch on the Pelicans. We call him instant impact Dyson Daniels because as soon as he touches the floor, he is impacting the game in some way. It may be scoring, maybe defense, maybe hustle, might be energy. He always impacts the game. And a lot of the things that you saw for the Pelicans, you saw this year for Atlanta just in a bigger sample size. Like a lot of the issues and some of the, rumblings from the Pelicans camp is that, the ownership and the leadership who drafted Dyson 9th wanted him to play. Well, he had a lot of nagging ankle injuries where he would get in, he would show promise, and then he would get hurt. He'd come back, couldn't hit a shot, and then the coach felt as if you can't play a young rookie who's not confident in the shot. Well, for Atlanta, you're not really asking him to score continuously every single night. You're asking him to be the number one all-ball defender. And, oh, by the way, you're playing with one of the best passers in the league in Trae Young who can put you in opportunities to succeed. And so for Dyson's game, you ask, like, what is he? I've always compared him to, like, Alonzo Ball before he could shoot, right? he does a lot of the small things. He's good in open space. He's a connector in a lot of ways, and he's got different ways to score around the basket that are like unorthodox and maybe more European style than the NBA style. But again, I don't expect Dyson to ever average 20 points per game because that's not what he's there to be. And so really just getting the opportunity to stay on the court and be healthy and then play through his mistakes and build that confidence. I'm not surprised at all that Dyson was able to shine in this environment.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to speak on the other side of it. I mean, Dyson averaged 15 points a game this season. If you would have told me that Dyson Daniels was averaging 15 points a game in an NBA, I would have been like, there's no way. Like, this is a 7 to 8 kind of guy, but like he could probably get you not. Dyson's rapid offensive improvement. And when I looked at when I said and I looked at it, because it was after the Celtics game where he just was like, all right, to hell with this. I got it. And he went into Boston and like won the game. Yeah. That I was like, man, that does not look like the Dyson Daniels that was in New Orleans. But to my brother's point, the defensive side of the ball, you saw this coming. Like he led the league in deflections with the Pelicans, right? He got to the Hawks, and some of those deflections ended up turning into steals. But you saw with more minutes, his stats kind of poured it over. As that minutes went up, he was able to continue his defensive side. Coming into last season, the season before he got traded to Atlanta, he talked about wanting to be more like Herb Jones, meaning being a defensive playmaker. He was always a good, stand a person up defensively, stop you. Okay, now what? Now you have to play something else. But he wanted to really get into getting steals, getting blocks, getting plays that put the team into transition. He wanted to be the initiator on that side. And watching him in his Hawk, that's what he has done. Like, he has turned a lot of those deflections, a lot of those tip passes into pick sixes, into interceptions, into transition buckets for him. And that has gotten his confidence up. He even talked about it towards the end of the season. I saw an interview with him where he was talking about in New Orleans, it was all about letting the superstars do them and letting Zion do them and Brandon Ingram. There's a lot of big name guys in New Orleans who may not be superstar, but who Brandon Ingram is, who Trey Murphy is, who Zion is, who these guys are. So he came in trying to fit. In Atlanta, he's taking his career by the horns. And whenever we could get proactive Dyson, where he's not just sitting in the cut waiting for things to happen, when he's on the floor making things happen, you see what it's turning into. And now that he's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, I mean, again, the Pelicans had Herb Jones on their team, and he was first team all defense. And if you heard us in the podcast that we had with you, he probably was a better defender than Herb Jones. It's just he never
I would argue that he is a better all-ball defender than Herb Jones. Even last year, it was just the other parts of the game that Herb was ahead of him.
Yeah. And so now you see it, and it's coming to fruition. So it's been really good to see Dyson's career kind of flourish and him finding his groove and finding a role with the Hawks that allows him to be successful.
Yeah, and I think, too, for me, watching him this season, I think the one thing about Dyson that I think has always been very impressive is just I felt like when you're in the role he was in New Orleans, where he was buried behind some guys a little bit, and obviously he would get his playing time when he could, but this year he was able to kind of figure more about his game out. I mentioned a couple of times throughout the year, I feel like Dyson was able to start improving his shot profile, understanding, okay, what can I do offensively right now and where? 3-point shooting is obviously something that he is working to improve on. And after the All-Star break, he actually shot a pretty good percentage from three. I think it was north of 40, but he only took 1 or 2 a game. But it was one of those things where you're watching it and you're kind of all right, seems like he's able to make some threes. He just isn't, with his release and everything, he's not going to be quick trigger guy. So it's almost he really needs to make sure he's open before he takes the shot. And also that could be a confidence thing because he's a smart player. He understands that's not my best shot. But attacking the paint, I always said, especially because the Hawks used him uniquely this year, because they used him in kind of a backup point guard role once Kobe Buffkin went down. So we were giving him reps just kind of running the team when Trey came off the floor. And I said that I noticed from that position, Dyson would become more aggressive attacking players. Because at the end of the day, Dyson's 6'7". So sometimes he's getting defended by smaller point guards. And I noticed there would be times where he would attack those guys. He would go to the rim, and then that's where he'll hit the spin move floater that he does now. And he talked about it like, because he's like, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's like you feel the contact and then you kind of spin off of it. And now that's when you create your space. And, and for a guy who's not known as an offensive player to be able to have that type of knowledge on the offensive end and be able to just kind of say, all right, this is a move I have, and I can take advantage of a defensive player's positioning or body leverage or whatever, I think just shows, okay, it seems like Dyson here is starting to kind of figure things out where now he can be impactful. Because I remember he said early in the season, he was just like, listen, Trey, does a lot offensively. I want to help take some of that pressure off of him. I don't want him to just feel like he has to take all the shots. Like, I want to be able to provide offensively. And I think that's something that he's been working on. And I'm excited to see how he continues to progress throughout the offseason with that. Now, obviously, I know he's also expanded the brand. The Great Barrier Thief brand is, growing line now. So he's definitely taking advantage of all the added attention that he's getting this season. And I think the big thing really is just some people have even asked the question of like, if he's already this good defensively, if he can get that offensive game to a certain point, could we be mentioning Dyson as an all-star level player potentially? Could he get to that point? Just because if he averages like 18, 19, he's giving you first team all defense, like where would that put you with Dyson? Like it kind of makes sense. We're like, he could be.
Yeah, I mean, listen. He has all of the makings of an all-star. Like you talk about the defensive side of the ball, and getting able, that can up your points. Just being in the defensive side of the ball, getting into the passing lanes, getting in those steals, and getting 4 or 6 points off of straight line steals and pick sixes and things. And so, when you think about guys who have made the all-star team who aren't huge scorers, Draymond has made the all-star team before. And then when you look at obviously in the Eastern Conference, I think with him, he's going to have a lot of competition, if not on his own team, when you guys get healthy for that all-star spot. So I think that might be getting his way. But I mean, outside of that, if again, I watched that Miami Heat game, the Heat and Hawks game, and Dyson made some timely threes in that game where it looked like he was comfortable taking those shots. I remember one, especially the late in, I think it was in overtime, where they passed the ball out to Dyson. He hit a like straight line, dead eye 3. And I was like, okay, Dyson, like he stepped into it and everything. And so if he's going to get that confidence, and he's still figuring his offensive game out. He's still super duper young. And he's putting, averaging 15 as he's figuring his way around the league, and figuring out his game, like you mentioned. If he can figure some of those things out and get that scoring up to 18 points and still play this kind of level of defense and maybe even take it up a notch, I don't see why not.
I love Dyson. Love watching Dyson. I don't know about all-star because not necessarily because of his ability or lack thereof of lack of ceiling, but to my brother's point, look who you're going to have to compete against. Like we have a great example of it that we watch every day for the Pelicans. CJ McCollum has averaged 20 points for like 10 seasons in a row and hasn't sniffed an all-star game. And so, yes, he doesn't give you the defensive end like Dyson does, who's in the defensive player of the year running, but like, if I look at Herb Jones, who was first team all defense when he was the only wing, and I look at Lou Dort, who's on the number 1 team in the West, who's the number 1 defense in the league, those guys aren't even close, right? To getting an all-star bid as a guard, just because there's so few spots in that area. But again, like to your point earlier and to what I was saying before, a lot of Dyson's growth is just based off opportunity. The quote that I love is confidence comes from demonstrated ability. So many times Dyson would miss a 3 or pass up a 3 and he'd get taken out immediately. Well, this season for Atlanta, if he missed the 3, guess what, Dyson? You're right back out there. You get that confidence that, hey, if I miss, I can still play through it. I can still go through it. And that's what I saw from Dyson. So to my brother's point, he's still a really young player. I know in the NBA, if you haven't made all NBA 5 times by the time you're 23, the NBA likes to pass you up and things like that. But I just still think there's so much more room for him. And he's that type of player that can fit on any team and any rotation because he does so many things well. And so I think the sky is the limit for him. I just think for all-star, man, there's so many boxes you have to cross. You got to have the fan vote. There's just so many things that have to go your way to surpass some of the guys who have the names.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, we see that with Trae Young and, how he'll be, I think he finished, third, fourth this year in fan voting. And I think the year before that, he was like top 3 in fan voting and still had to get in through injury and stuff like that. So it could be tough because you got to have certain people on your side. But it seems like one thing I will say about Dyson that I think is really good is that it seems like he is being promoted in a very positive light. There have been plenty of articles written by the league and other big name journalists about him. And he's been on NBA TV. He's been on different things doing interviews. So clearly Dyson seems like a very positive light. Whereas you mentioned like a guy like Trae Young is kind of been battled. Some people kind of like iffy about him, things like that. And I think that works for him and what he's trying to do and build. So that leads me to my next question. And it's interesting to ask you guys because of the fact you both probably would have an incomplete grade on the season. But now knowing what you know, if you were in this position, like if you had a redo and they say, hey, we're going back to last year, hey, y'all were trying to make something happen with a trade and everything like that, would you guys have done this trade again? Or is there something about the trade you would have changed? If, because originally when we first had it, they were talking about Larry Nance before we saw Dyson was doing it. So is there anything, would y'all have done the trade if you knew this?
I'll go. Yeah, I think you still do the trade. I think you still do the trade because, Dyson has a lot of ability and, he has a lot of things that are going for him. What the Pelicans needed going into the season, again, you can never, maybe if you're with the Pelicans, you can kind of factor in injuries all the time, but you can't really see injuries coming. So the player that the Pelicans needed going into the season, going into this past season, was more Dejounte Murray than Dyson Daniels. And what I mean by that is last season, the Pelicans were awful in the clutch. They were absolutely the worst team in the clutch, probably one of the worst teams in NBA history in the clutch when they didn't win a single game by trailing in the fourth quarter.
121, yep.
Yeah, didn't win a single game. And so Dyson wasn't really going to help with that situation. Again, he get out there, he plays defense, he helps you, keep games close with his defense and his playmaking. But when it's time to win games in the fourth quarter, the Pelicans couldn't afford to have Dyson Daniels, and Willie Green wasn't going to have Dyson Daniels out there to end games. He would have had Dejounte Murray, and Dejounte would have been able to help in some of those late game situations. We saw his first game in New Orleans. That game, he was pretty good in the clutch, making some good passes as well as some floaters and mid ranges in the waning moments of that game. And so I think you do the trade. Obviously, the injuries suck, and Dyson having the season that he has while Dejounte is injured makes it look extremely bad. But I think if you looked while they were both playing, they were both doing exactly what they needed for both teams. I think the Hawks needed a guy to come in there and play with that level of defense and that level of IQ and defensive smartness on the side. And the Pelicans needed a point guard who was able to distribute while also maintaining the defensive principles that Willie Green liked, and also be able, to close in the clutch game. So I think you do this trade again, especially with Dejounte not being on not an awful contract, especially when you look at some of these contracts being out there. I think you do this trade again.
Well, I'll echo everything you said in return to that. It's hard to judge now that you've seen how everything is, and one player's hurt and one player's fighting for awards. The second part of your question, what would I have trade differently now that I know? I would have included Brandon Ingram in the trade instead of Dyson Daniels. If Brandon Ingram was going to be gone anyway and was going to be shipped anyway, I would still rather Dyson on this roster than Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown and the first round pick that you received. And so that would be the change. Again, like, it hurt my heart when I saw Dyson was a part of the trade, just because he's so much fun to watch, because he sees the game the same way that I see the game in a lot of ways. But again, like, obviously revisionist is history. Like, it's hard to make that change now that you've seen it.
Yeah, and that's fair. And obviously, y'all know I'll take the trade again.
I bet.
It's like, I think the biggest thing too that's underrated is I think we found a really good fit with Trae, and I think that's something we've been searching for a long time. It's just finding.
So look, I not to cut you, I wanted to ask you that. So why do you think that that Dyson fit next to Trae a little bit better. I guess it's only been one season, so you can't really. But like, why do you think that seems like it could be a better fit than Dejounte?
I think the biggest thing is really on the defensive end. I think when we traded for Dejounte, there was this perception of him that he was this elite defender, right? And when he was in Atlanta, he was not good defensively. He wasn't. But I also think that was part of it was him playing out of position. He was playing against 2 guards. I think DJ plays better at the 1 defending and then going from there than playing at the 2 in defending. Now, obviously, we always say it's a positionless league, so it's like 2's going to be 1s, 1's going to be 2s, whatever. But I just think because offensively they were great. Like offensively, they both averaged 20. Like, so they were both scoring. It was just defensively, which is not good for point of attack. Point of attack defense was terrible. So it puts a lot of pressure on your front court to hold up, like kind of almost like how you've seen maybe Cleveland. They just have all this size after Donovan Mitchell and Garland. And so they're able to kind of handle them not being the best point of attack defenders. And so I think with Dyson, since he's able to guard the point of attack and guard the other team's best player, it really helps, just the dynamic, because it's almost like where Dyson needs his help, which is maybe like, a guy who can get him the ball, a playmaker like Trey, because attention is going to be on Trey and allows Dyson to have the opportunities, one-on-one opportunities. And then on the defensive end, Trey's not the greatest defender in the world. Listen, people killed him for the play in overtime, but there was also a play earlier in that Heat game where he was hustling, fighting for balls, everything like that. So, and a lot of that may also come from, obviously you're in a do or die game, but at the same time, I think Dyson is a guy who's also been able to show that level of energy in so many games this year, and him being able to pick up that defensive slack. Because I feel like last year we had it with Dejounte, we had a very over-helping type of scheme because we knew, like, okay, they can't really hold up. Where this year, Dyson being there has helped, where at first I think we were still over-helping because I think that's just what the team was used to. But, I remember Coach Quinn was like, people don't know, like, Dyson, even if it looks like he's getting passed by, he has very good recovery where he can get back in position. So you don't really have to over-help. You can just, if you need to do like a quick show or something like that, that's fine. But you don't have to just completely leave your man. So I think those things have been ideal. And I think one example is we had one season example of this. It was DeLon Wright a couple of years ago. He's more of a defensive guy, known in the league, defensive guy. And I think the plus minus showed that year that I think Trey and DeLon was like +4, +5 when they played together on the floor, when they played them both. Just because I think just the defensive offense, it just kind of fits instead of just all offense, or, like I think also Dyson being able to do something offensively help. Like I don't think it would be good if we had like a Tabo Cephalosha. Like I don't think we need he was effective for the 60 minutes.
Right. Yeah, no, I got you.
It's a little different. So I think that's why the fit between the two is much better, just because I feel like they play off each other well. And Trey's been very open about him. He's talked about he looks forward to continuing to play with Dyson and grow with Dyson as years come on, and could, in a couple of years, we may be talking about those two being one of the top backcourts in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. It's the other thing to point out. I know you kind of mentioned, Dejounte was more guarding 1s than 2s and things like that. Dejounte is also a slender guy. He's long and things like that. Yeah. The reason why, I was so high on Dyson's perimeter defense last season and being even better than Herb Jones, it's because Dyson's a solid guy. Like he is not your typical NBA guard that's smaller and faster and not, he has size. And so to your point, like, Dyson can match up versus the Tatums and the Browns because he has that strength to be able to do so. Whereas Dejounte, to your point, that's not putting him in the situations to succeed because they could just overpower him and the Lukas of the world and things like that. Whereas Dyson doesn't necessarily back away from those. So to your point, like when you boil players down to what they do best, people aren't going to say Dejounte Murray is best at defense. They're going to say he's a scorer who plays defense. When you boil Dyson Daniels down, the thing he gives you most is first team all defense availability. So it makes total sense why it's such a hit for the Hawks.
Listen, I was scarred by, it's funny you mentioned that, him playing bigger guys, because I just remember there were times where, like, we played the Lakers. I remember the specific game was the Lakers, and DeAndre Hunter was out that game. So guess who was guarding LeBron James in the last 2 minutes of the game? Dejounte Murray. And that is a terrible matchup. That was
don't worry. We had to watch the Pelicans to to Las Vegas in the play-in tournament, not the play-in tournament, the in-season tournament finals, the semi-final conference, or whatever it is. And first play of the game, LeBron dropped his shoulder into Herb Jones, laid the ball up and won, and flexed over Herb, and you know what happened in that game. The Pelicans lost by a lot. So we know a thing or two about LeBron walking in and finding your slender defender and putting him on the bench.
Yeah, so yeah, and then like, listen, I think for both teams, obviously the Hawks continue to want to see the progression of Dyson moving forward. Obviously, a big year for the team coming up, and obviously you guys are hoping for health. Hopefully, Dejounte gets back, and then obviously just seeing again with the new regime that y'all have, how does he fit in? How do you guys work him? Does he become a high-level six man? So I think those are two things that I think both sides of the spectrum will be looking at.